Welcome to another edition of Value My Vote, one-on-one with the candidates, and we're joined by mayoral candidate and current councilman of the 12th District, Mr. Carl Stokes. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Hassan. Good to be here with you. Thanks for taking time to do this. This is really important because, no one really does this sort of in-depth thing for campaigns or candidates.
And I think, we want to thank you for giving us this time because this one-on-one is with the voters. They get to know who Carl Stokes really is.
Sure.
From your own mouth, not from everybody else and
Right.
the reporter saying who they think you are.
Sure.
This is from you.
Great.
First question, probably the elephant in the room that most people ask me, so I'm going to ask you.
Go ahead.
You were appointed to take the place of a colleague of yours, Bernard Jack Young, who
Sure.
last year as a councilman. Why run for mayor now and not stay in the 12th district and run for council?
Well, I came into the 12th district just to serve out the term, to be frank with you. You may know that I and some other African-American males in Baltimore started a school for boys, a charter school, Bluford Drew Jemison, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade year old, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. And it's a school that's open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We feed the students breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. The only school, when we opened it 4 years ago, that served dinner. We went out and raised $1.2 million in the first 2 years. The school is open on Saturday and 12 months a year. And the young people not only learn the academics, but we also do tutoring and mentoring, and they play chess, or they're in bands, they go to debate club. And so it's a very comprehensive program that we run over there. And I felt very strongly that I had talked so long about education that here's a chance to do it. We opened a school which has been very successful. When Jack asked me to come back to the council, I resisted going into the council. Long story short, I did go in. And in my first 10 days in the council, the mayor said, I'm going to close half the recreation centers and most of the pools in Baltimore City. And I waited in my office upstairs and no one moved. And finally I said, hey, I'm going out in the street, call the press conference and say we're not closing them. Now, I and the council, we don't have the power to keep things open, but I said we're not closing them. And some of my colleagues also met me outside in front of the pool, and we stopped it. So a year ago, when the mayor said we're closing pools and rec centers, we stopped that from happening, and the pools and the rec centers remained open. And then there were a number of other things that have been going on. Long story short, Hassan, I just think that the direction of the city leadership is not the direction in which the citizens feel that they should be going. And so I decided to run for mayor of the city rather than remain in my city council seat at this time.
For background, you are an education advocate for decades now.
Yes.
You were a former city councilman before this actual
I was.
term. And you have run what seems to be a similar election in 1999. It wasn't exactly the same, but then you and Lawrence Bell, the two top out of the 17 candidates that were in the race, ran and split, and Martin O'Malley obviously split the African American vote, became mayor and then governor. What makes this time any different, and what do you expect for the voters to get to know about who Carl Stokes is now, 12 years later?
Well, I think this is a much different race. I don't think there's going to be a, quote, splitting of the vote this time as there was some 12 years ago. I think it's maybe 25% of the population is different than it was 12 years ago. We've seen that in some polling, that there is a different constituency. Not that it's all changed, but 12 years ago there were a cohort of voters who weren't able to vote because they were too young. There's a cohort of voters who have moved into the city, and then there's unfortunately a large cohort of voters who have left the city and no longer are here to vote. And so we have changed dynamics. And I think that the candidates who are running are not the same as the candidates who were here 12 years ago. I want the voters to know that I feel very strongly about this city. It's my home, but it doesn't matter that someone who wasn't bred here cannot run for mayor. But I want them to understand that I am a neighborhood guy, that I'm a guy who said we ought to do this about education. And then when I didn't win the mayor's seat, I didn't leave town. I didn't go off somewhere else. I didn't hide and duck my head and no one heard from me again. I stayed in the community. I stayed a part of my community organization. I founded a school for boys with some other gentlemen, and we did something that we think was pretty significant in those things that I've been talking about, fixing rather than reacting to. And I see so much a reaction to in this city. Police showing up after something has happened. Police cars staying in a neighborhood after a murder has taken place, putting bright lights on after a murder has taken place, and there's no reason to do that at that point. What was going on before was neighbors saying, here's what's going on in our community. And you know what? We will tell you who's doing what, where it is, what time of day it's happening, and we'll tell you that. Now, you come over and do something about it. But so often, nothing happened. Sometimes the persons who were telling the stories are the ones who got in trouble. They're the ones who got aggravation. They're the ones who took a hit, or the windows were broken, or they were beat up. And so on one hand, there are people saying that neighbors don't tell, but neighbors do tell. But I'm not sure that the prosecutors, maybe sometimes the police, have been protective of these people. I know I'm going a little bit around, but my point is this. I'm a guy who understands and feels the heart of this city. I'm a guy who knows and walks the streets and serves folk. And whether it's in political office or whether it's just as a community activist, I've been there and I'm still going to be there. And it's what I do now. When I went back into the council, at heart, I'm a community activist. Mm-hmm. So when the mayor says I'm closing pools and rec centers, I didn't sit there and wait and see if we could vote on a resolution. I went out on the street. I said, meet me outside. People and folk came around and said, we're not closing our pool.
And you also actually stood up against the bottle tax last year that the mayor introduced, which at that time was 4 cents.
Right.
And you got it reduced to 2 cents.
We got it reduced to 2 cents, which was a compromise, but not that I was happy about the compromise. I think that in this city, the tax burden is too high on the citizens. I think that raising the water tax 9% every year is the wrong thing to do. I know we have an infrastructure that needs to be fixed, but you know what? We figure out how to do bonds and loans and giveaways to pretty big multi-millionaire developers in this town. We ought to figure out how we can do something creative to fix our water system without charging residents and homeowners extraordinarily high taxes or rates. The property tax is way too high for an average homeowner. I live in a middle-income neighborhood here on Guilford Avenue, but it's just so many of the voters. Let's go to the voters. Are folk who are on limited incomes or fixed incomes. You know, they don't get COLAs every year. They don't get 9% increases. Some years they get nothing. Some years they get 1%. The people who are at the bottom rungs of city government, their wages, they get furloughed, you know? Mm-hmm. Meaning they get a pay cut. That's what furlough means. It means you don't come to work and you don't get paid. It's not a vacation. And so all of these individuals are taking greater and greater increases in their taxes and in their expenses. And the city doesn't seem to understand that everyone in their homes are tightening their belts. But the city is unwilling, apparently, to tighten its own belt in the places where it won't hurt people. Cutting rec centers hurts people. Cutting funds to school hurt people. Now the city gives way too few dollars to schools in this town. It says it's maintaining level funding, which means it's a cut because there are step increases every year in school. There are health costs that go up every year. So we're not keeping pace with the expenses of educating our young people. I think very strongly that the city is in the wrong place in terms of its priorities. You know, the city says we need a new fancy schmancy recreation center downtown in the harbor. You know, so we can attract Major League basketball, hockey teams, I presume, I don't know. And then they tell me that the tourists need more amenities downtown. So they want to put up a trapeze line, or they want to put up a Ferris wheel, or they want to build an Eiffel Tower because they say that the tourists need amenities. People in my neighborhood say they need amenities, like a good school, like a straight street that doesn't have potholes every half block. They like some amenities too. And so we're not spending our dollars where people live, where people worship, and pretty much where people play and sometimes work. So I'm running for mayor because I think our priorities are in the wrong place. And I think leadership not only doesn't understand it, but they don't feel it either. They just don't feel what folk who live in an average street feel. They don't feel what people who are limited and fixed incomes feel when they get property tax hikes, bottle tax increases, phone rate increases, gas and electric rate increases. All of that happened in the last 12 months to average citizens. And in the last 3 years, we had a 6% raise in water bills, a 9% hike in water bills, and another 9% hike in water bills. 18 and 6 is 24, right? Okay, so we're talking about everybody paying almost 25% more in water bills in the last 3 years.
Well, if the voters who can, because it's kind of condensed, and you can go on. I know
I
it's a
know,
lot
I'm
of
sorry,
issues.
I've been long-winded.
If they can feel you and they want to get more information on you and your candidacy, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, we're at Carl Stokes for Baltimore.com. You could tweet us at, hope I get this right, Carl Stokes for Balto, B-A-L-T-O, because we had to shorten it because of the character limitation there is. We're on Facebook, of course. But you can go to the website, and from the website, link to the other social media. And I have a lot of information there on where I stand on several issues, but people can also talk to us via Twitter, via Facebook, via email, via the website. And so we'd be glad to respond and talk to citizens and get their opinions. By the way, every once in a while, I get on the MTA bus and I ride the bus. Now, I don't necessarily have a schedule, just wherever I happen to be. Sometimes I just get on a bus and ride the bus, and amazingly, or maybe not, people come over and sit down beside me and start talking. And it's not all bad stuff. People come over and said, here's an idea. And so I enjoy the bus rides also.
Well, Carl Stokes, we enjoy you, and we would thank you for your service and years of service, and we thank you for this time and your candidacy for mayor this year. We wish you well.
Thank you, Hassan. Thank you for this. This is great. I appreciate you guys being able to do this for all the candidates.
Carl Stokes, Democratic candidate for mayor this year, 2011, and we'll be back with more Value My Vote.